I'm going to have to censor myself in the upcoming report to avoid algorithm strikes. So think of this presentation as the clean version of a popular song with offensive words digitally scrubbed out. So get ready for the FM radio edit of The Daniel Natal Show. I was reading the comment section beneath an article about the seizure of all the institutions of power by the left, and the poster said something that depressed me. He said sarcastically, "Just wait until the people who just want to be left alone finally get involved." That underscored and encapsulated the instinct of passivity from Republicans, mostly under the influence of libertarianism, that allowed the radical left to take over. In mulling the subject of passivity, my thoughts wandered over to the last political cycle. I thought of how people were encouraged to sit on their couches under the notion that secret white hats were going to rout out all the bad guys, and they weren't called upon to do anything but watch. You might know what I'm talking about relative to a certain letter of the alphabet that will see algorithms suppress this video. A whole movement grew up around this initiative with phrases like, these thoughts percolated up recently as I was reading the philosopher Baruch Spinoza. In his book Ethics, he points out that the word passion comes from the same root word that gives us passive. A man in the grip of certain emotions is therefore passive. Being awestruck, for instance, sees you become passive. Likewise, pain. Spinoza writes, "But the emotion of pain is always a passion or a passive state." Or not being able to fight the impulses behind lust. Spinoza says that there are also active emotions. Some of these he mentions are courage, fortitude, high-mindedness. By high-mindedness he means helping others. These emotions see one become active. The upshot is, vices make you passive. Virtues make you active. By vices I mean things like smoking, which you can't help, or sexual impulses, which society tells you mustn't resist, or alcohol. People have a habit of becoming passive in the grip of these things. Addiction, of course, is associated with what neuroscientists call the lizard brain, the amygdala. Virtues, by contrast, take place in the prefrontal cortex and makes use of what scientists call executive function. This is all about impulse control. So basically, in a gross oversimplification, ethical people are active and vice-ridden people are passive. In Considerations on Representative Government, John Stuart Mill stressed the importance of active people. He wrote that a republic requires an active populace, people who will vote, do jury duty, and take part in their communities. By contrast, all that a tyranny requires is that people be passive and obedient. He wrote, "This question really depends upon a still more fundamental one, namely, which of two common types of character, for the general good of humanity, it is most desirable should predominate, the active or the passive type, that which struggles against evils, or that which endures them, that which bends to circumstances, or that which endeavors to make circumstances bend to itself." He has an interesting section in which he describes the character difference between active people and passive people. An active person, for instance, sees a problem within himself and he changes it. A passive person, by contrast, sees a problem within himself and he blames others. In reading that, I was struck by modern grievance culture, where women are encouraged to blame men, or minorities are encouraged to blame white people. These people, whether they know it or not, are being trained to be passive. They're being taught that they're not responsible for themselves, but that someone else is supposed to have power over them. Someone else is supposed to be responsible for their destiny. This is not what is taught in a republic, where people are encouraged to be self-directed and independent. This is the training a person receives in a tyranny. Mill, like Aristotle before him, wrote that tyrants like passive populations. Aristotle even goes a step further and says that the tyrant will encourage sin and vice. He fears a virtuous population because a virtuous population will oust him. Due to his own profligacy and disillusion, he would be offensive to good men. So it's in the tyrant's interest to have a population of low moral character. Perversion will be advocated in his dictatorship, as would addiction. A degenerate population would be less inclined to remove a tyrant, because they wouldn't feel like they had the moral authority to complain about him. Lastly, however, and most importantly, a vice-ridden population is passive, as Spinoza indicates. They do not have active emotions like courage. They have only passive emotions, which incline them to low impulse control behaviors and addictions. So long as they're caught up in the hamster wheel of vice, the tyrant can breathe freely. Following this logic, during the last presidential administration, psyops were marketed to people whereby they were told to sit on their couches and do nothing. The good guys behind the scenes, they were told, would take care of everything. They didn't have to do anything. With the remove of time and the clarity that comes with retrospect, we can now do an autopsy and see what was being sold to us as passivity. The proponents of a republic would be demanding that people be active, like the John Birch Society is an example, which asks participants to affect their communities, to take part in local political processes. or by other marketing gimmicks told people to sit back and let others take the reins. Trust the plan, you were told. Sit back, let us do the heavy lifting. This is the logic of passivity, and is a hallmark of a tyrannical state. It's the fingerprint of an authoritarian governmental structure, which, as John Stuart Mill says, only requires your passivity and obedience. There's a very old maxim that the tree is judged by its fruits. Well, after all is said and done, a campaign that encouraged people to be passive is in striking contrast to advice given out in a republic. It has all the hallmarks of a con job being promoted by social engineers whose roots trace back to those whose sympathies are more in favor of tyranny. Could reading the New American Magazine boost your heart health, support your immune system, and help you lose 20 pounds of unsightly fat? The answer is no. But you should read it anyway. It'll keep you informed and provide information that cuts through the noise of lesser news outlets. thenewamerican.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on social media and hit that like button.